up on Global Business. Stocks gain ahead of the latest U.S. jobs data. Economists expect the numbers to underline challenges facing the Federal Reserve. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership has come into effect in the Philippines today, and we look at its impact. BRICS nations issued a joint statement urging the use of local currencies in trade between members and partners. From CGTN headquarters in Beijing, this is Global Business. I'm Lily Lu. We begin our program with an update on the U.S. job situation and efforts to prevent a potential debt default. Joining us with the latest developments is our correspondent John Terrett in New York. Hi there, John. Please bring us up to speed on the current status of the U.S. employment.
Yes, we've just had it. It's all broken within the last 30 minutes or so, and we all had a bit of a shock here, let me tell you. Now, this is what they call the non-farms, okay? It's all the jobs created in America in the month of May that was not to do with agriculture, all right? It's the jobs report from the government for the month of May, and it's important because as the authorities here wrestle with 40-year high inflation, inflation is down now from where it was a year ago, but it's still elevated, and they want to bring it down even further without damaging the U.S. economy too much. So jobs are absolutely key to bringing inflation down. We need to know how many people are employed, how many people are not employed, and so on. Now, we've had a shock, as I say, and I'll explain it to you. Economists have been looking for 200,000 jobs to be created in the month of May, down from 253,000 in April, and down from 285,000, which was the average across the year as a whole. What do we get? 339,000 new jobs created in just the month of May. That's 139,000 more than pretty much every single economist have been forecasting. Now, the unemployment rate went up to 3.7% from 3.4%. So that means that more people are losing their jobs than are getting jobs. But the key bit of data is the average hourly earnings, which the central bank will be very keen to find out. It came in up 0.3%, exactly where economists thought it would be. But for the year as a whole, 4.3%, which is down a little bit. So, in summary, although we had a shock when we saw that headline figure, there is actually something in this data for absolutely everybody. And now attention moves to the central bank, the Federal Reserve, that meets on the 13th and 14th of June. They will have this data when they come to thinking about whether to raise interest rates or to pause. They will also have key data known as CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, which tells us how much more Americans are paying in the gas stations and the stores month over month and year over year. The chatter on Wall Street, which is pretty much where I am now, the chatter still suggests that the Federal Reserve will pause when they meet in the middle of June. But these figures, I'm afraid, rather rattle everybody, and it's very possible now they will rise by 25 basis points. So another hike where a pause had been expected. What did the markets do? Well, the Dow was elevated in the futures markets by 140 points before the news. It's now up around 200 points. And the yield on the government bonds is increased as well, the 10-year by 4 basis points. So I think in summary, Lily, once again, it's wait and see what happens next.
And also, John, we know that investors have another thing in their mind, that is the debt ceiling. So what actions have been taken to avoid a default?
Yes, well, this was in the Senate now. So, you know, on Wednesday night, the House passed it. Now the Senate passed it last night. They moved very, very swiftly. The Senate is a debating chamber. It's supposed to take a very long time over these things, but they did all this within a 24-hour time frame. President Biden now says that he will sign the 99-page bill as soon as it crosses his desk, presumably sometime today, Friday, to give the markets a bit of a boost. I have to tell you, it was a marathon late-night session in the Senate with a lot of acrimony. They had to give voice to senators who were really unhappy about the increased restrictions on claiming food stamp benefits, for example, less money for tax collection, the resumption of the payment of student loans for many students. There had been a moratorium on that. And on the other side, on the Republican side, just deep satisfaction that the cuts in this bill simply didn't go far enough. However, Lily, in the end, the greater good prevailed, and all 100 senators did what they should do for the country and for the rest of the world, and they voted in favor of this bill, largely, I think, because it's only 2 years long. It's not forever. It's just for the next 2 years, this bill. And the debt ceiling issue, the threat of America running out of money, has gone away now. This won't come back to us until 2025, after the next presidential election. Lily?
Oh, great stuff. Thank you so much. That's John Terrett for us from New York. And the decline of US dollar's dominance in the global trading system is evident in one of its biggest allies, that's United Arab Emirates. The second largest economy in the Arab world is in talks with India to settle non-oil trading using Indian rupees. Jim Stem has more.
It's the world's dominant currency underpinning American power and largely unchallenged for as long as most can remember.
Having said all of that, there does seem to be an opening for some competition, albeit on a small scale, as this country, a major U.S. ally, explores trading outside of the dollar.
It's definitely been a trend, I would say, for the region to lean to the east. And with that came the idea of using non-dollar currencies for trade in energy and also in other goods.
The UAE, which yields significant influence in the Middle East, is in talks to conduct non-oil trade with India in rupees. This after a recent trade deal between the Emirates and the world's most populous country, which aims to increase bilateral non-oil trade to $100 billion in the next few years.
Yeah, I think this is an important story. Growing sign of the world sort of trying to move away from a dollar denominator or a dollar controlled or US controlled economic system.
Back in March, China conducted its first ever yuan-settled LNG deal in the UAE, seen by many as a blow to the US, but crucially billed in dollars, indicating US currency, which Gulf countries' own money is pegged to, won't lose dominance anytime soon.
The UAE is very keen on promoting trade with India. There's a lot of strategic plays going on there, certainly on the energy side.
And boosting ties with India just makes sense, with its citizens accounting for the largest expat group in the UAE, far exceeding that of locals, but both of whom now benefit from removed tariffs on roughly 80% of all goods and zero duty access to 90% of Indian exports.
The idea is that if they conduct that trade in rupees, then it will make the cost of business go down and hopefully foster more trade in the future.
We haven't seen any transactions from Saudi Arabia in general in non-dollar currencies. This is kind of the testing ground here. It usually happens in the UAE first. Perhaps Aramco would be next.
For now, though, talks of any non-dollar transactions, whether these actually materialize or not, should probably be read as a political statement more than anything else.
The last couple of years, the level of sanctions that have been imposed by the US and other countries on certain people, I think there is a fear amongst a lot of other countries that, you know, maybe that could happen to them one day. There is a need there to really try and say, well, let's have an alternative to dealing in the dollar.
And while the U.S. will remain a dominant force in global trade for decades to come, the very idea of de-dollarization is one that it'll have to respond to at some point in the future. Jim Stenman, CGTN, Dubai.
You're watching Global Business here on CGTN. Still to come on program. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership has come into effect in the Philippines today. We look at its impact.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global Business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Well, the U.S. has reportedly reached an agreement on a trade deal with the Taiwan region. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said on Friday that the U.S. signing of the 21st Century Trade Initiative with Taiwan region has seriously violated the One China principle and the Three China-U.S. communiques.
China firmly opposes countries with diplomatic ties with China to have any official exchanges with Taiwan region, including the negotiation and signing of any agreements related to sovereign issues and with other official nature. The so-called initiative is just a baton for the U.S. to take advantage of Taiwan under the guise of economic and trade cooperation. It is the nomination of the Taiwan Democratic Progressive Party authorities to sell out the vital interests of Taiwan residents and enterprises for its own gains. This is the latest example of the U.S. deflating and hollowing out the One China principle.
China and Argentina on Friday jointly signed a cooperation plan to further advance the Belt and Road Initiative. The plan aims to deepen mutually beneficial cooperation in infrastructure, energy, bilateral trade, and other important areas. It will bring more opportunities for further bilateral cooperation. And next, we focus on the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or the RCEP, which has come into effect in the Philippines from Friday. The country's tariff commitments under the agreement will also be implemented from the same day. And according to Philippine Trade and Industry Secretary Alfredo Pascal, the RCEP is a critical key towards achieving inclusive economic growth, not just for the Philippines, but also for the entire ASEAN region. A study by the Philippine Institute for Development has indicated that the country's gross domestic product is expected to rise by 2.02% as a result of its participation in the RCEP. And this is the world's biggest free trade agreement, and its successful implementation is expected to provide significant benefits to the region as a whole. Well, the Trade Pact, which already took effect on the 1st of January last year, has created the world's largest free trade area in terms of economic size. This will bring benefits to the countries and enterprises within the region and beyond. Yu Bo-kun reports.
RCEP is a big deal. It stands for the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. It's so far the world's largest free trade agreement, covering 15 participating countries, including the 10 ASEAN countries and Australia, China, Japan, New Zealand, and South Korea. This mega deal accounts for nearly 30% of the global population and a combined 1/3 of the world's GDP. So what does it do? The deal aims to break down trade barriers and promote investment among member states. Under the agreement, over 90% of the merchandise trade among members will be subject to zero tariff eventually. According to the Asian Development Bank, by 2030, RCEP will add $245 billion and 2.8 million jobs to the member economies. The rules of origin under the deal makes RCEP special. It determines where a product was made and eliminates tariffs on goods traded between members. For example, a company in Vietnam is making furniture for clients in Singapore. The two are part of the ASEAN Free Trade Zone. But because some parts of the furniture are made in China, Singapore may charge a tariff on the finished product. But the RCEP will remove barriers like that, encouraging countries to look within the bloc for suppliers.
And our correspondent Gretchen Marmalade interviewed Assistant Secretary Alan Getty from the Department of Trade and Industry, who is also the Philippines' lead RCEP negotiator. Take a look.
We have to intensify really our trade education and advocacy campaign. Our stakeholders must know the simple procedures that RCEP offers to them as far as conducting trade is concerned. They have to know the preferential arrangement that we have secured under this agreement. And of course, in general, the opportunities that this mega free trade deal offers to them.
So what industries will greatly benefit from RCEP? Will industries that trail behind while in the import-export business see a revival under RCEP?
Based on the study that we have conducted, among the top sectors that would benefit would be the electronic equipment and machinery equipment sector. This is, of course, this would include also other sectors like agriculture, particularly on vegetables, fruits, nuts, and other processed products. In the process, the construction industry is also perceived to benefit from RCEP due to an expected inflow of foreign investment. Because if you really want to optimize the benefits and advantages of the agreement, then it is imperative that you invest also in infrastructure. And in the process, definitely, construction industry would be one big sector that will benefit from it. And to complement this, sectors like transportation, logistics, and of course, manufacturing would be benefiting also.
And in China's southern city of Shenzhen, customs have just cleared the first shipment to the Southeast Asian nation under this agreement. Xu Hua has more.
The first batch of goods under RCEP has just been cleared by customs at Huanggang Port in Shenzhen and will arrive on the Philippines market in around 2 weeks.
Starting from June 2nd, the Philippines will enjoy favorable tariffs in trade with China on automobiles, certain plastic products, textiles, and more. After the transaction period, tariffs on the above products will gradually be reduced to zero.
We've mainly exported core materials and semi-finished products today. After RCEP comes into effect, the total amount of our exports to the Philippines is expected to increase by 2 to 3 times compared with the same period last year.
RCEP includes 15 East Asian and Pacific nations, totaling around 1/3 of the global population and GDP. The ratification of the Philippines is the latest step in regional integration.
Since the implementation of Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, the value of trade under RCEP through Shenzhen Customs District has reached 10.4 billion yuan, with tariff reductions amounting to 466 million yuan.
China is the Philippines' largest trade partner, with bilateral trade reaching more than $87 billion in 2022. By reducing trade barriers, RCEP is widely expected to promote increased trade and investment flows between China and the Philippines. Xu Hua, CGTN, Shenzhen, Guangdong Province.
Let's move on to some other business headlines around China that we are tracking. First, from January to February to April this year, China's total import and export of services exceeded 2 billion yuan, up more than 9% on a yearly basis. The proportion of knowledge-intensive service trade grew while the travel services industry showed a significant recovery. Rail Sea combined freight trains along the new Western Land Sea Corridor carried 350,000 or 12% more ETUs or tons equivalent of unions in the first 5 months of this year, covering 17 provinces, regions, and cities, while expanding to over 900 cargo categories. China successfully tested a 20,000-ton heavy haul autonomous train with independent property rights and a domestically produced autonomous driving control and core control system on Friday. And more to come here on Global Business. The BRICS nations issued a joint statement urging the use of local currencies in trade between its members and partners.
In a world where progress often comes at a greater environmental cost, China has emerged as a shining example of green achievement. With a growing demand for energy, China has stepped up to the challenge.
As we will have a higher demand for energy in the future, that is part of development. So it's all about how do we use it more efficiently.
China has been a game changer in the clean energy sector. They've taken risks and developed new technologies that are now being used globally.
We can use the innovation and the technology from China to serve the local market, but even the whole world.
Across the country, individuals and businesses are taking responsibility for their ecological footprint.
It is therefore not one silver bullet. It is everybody has to clean, so to say, their own house to be able to come to total positives.
With a focus on sustainability, China is creating a brighter future for generations to come.
It really needs a teamwork across nations, but also between governments and companies and the general population, all of us.
China's green achievement leading the way in a cleaner, greener world.
Biz Talk, only on CGTN.
Welcome back. Foreign ministers of BRICS have called for the use of its members' local currencies in international trade and financial transactions among BRICS members and their trading partners. This was among the key points of a foreign minister's statement issued on Thursday during their two-day meeting in Cape Town, South Africa. They reiterated their support for the group's new development bank in becoming a key multilateral development institution, while the ministers stressed the importance of financial inclusion so that their citizens can reap the benefits of economic growth. The ministers expressed support for the multilateral trading system with the World Trade Organization at its core and for continuing the process of IMF governance reform. And on geopolitics, the ministers expressed concerns about unilateral coercive measures and also called for an enhancement of global governance through an efficient and accountable international system. And they emphasized the importance of strengthening multilateralism and upholding international law while safeguarding the role of the UN. And they also discussed policies to expand BRICS membership. Well, as the foreign ministers of BRICS nations meet in South Africa, about 19 countries have applied to join the group that comprises of founders Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, one of these countries is Egypt, as Yasser Hakim reports from Cairo.
Reports of Egypt's candidacy request go as far back as when Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi attended the 2017 BRICS summit in China as a guest of honor.
The main criteria for that is to be a growing economy, promising one, and matching with the new economic order that is going on and led by BRICS countries, mainly China. So I think those are the most important criteria, and I think that Egypt is a little bit well fit in that criteria.
Egypt has close economic and trading ties with the BRICS member nations. China is Egypt's largest trading partner, with volume standing at $16.9 billion in 2022. Trade with India stands at $7.51 billion, Russia at $4.7 billion, and Brazil at $3.4. In 2021, Egypt became the first non-BRICS African member of the $100 billion New Development Bank formed by the group.
Entering the BRICS under the New Development Bank will allow access to finance at better terms than the West's IMF and World Bank's stringent conditions and help achieve projects for Sustainable Development 2030. Egypt is freeing itself from the dependence on the US and the West, who have politically motivated conditions and infringe on sovereignty in return for economic aid.
Experts believe Cairo would add value as well by becoming a BRICS member.
Egypt also is very promising for BRICS. It is a very important gate and a door open for Africa, for North Africa, for Arab countries, Middle East. So I think both sides will be benefit from Egypt membership.
The GDP of BRICS member nations has grown exponentially in recent years. Further expansion of the group can make it a considerable heavyweight that can help create a multipolar world order.
Most of the countries that have applied for BRICS membership are not on bad terms with the US, but they have been banned by the stringent conditions imposed by the West, which are mainly political conditions that infringe on their sovereignty. That's why they want to join BRICS. Let's be clear, the bloc is not a competitor nor an enemy of the West.
What remains to be seen is whether the group plans to expand in the near future. Now all eyes will be closely monitoring the outcomes and recommendations of the BRICS foreign ministers' meetings and the summit in South Africa. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo, Egypt.
The British dairy sector is facing a new challenge with the soaring popularity of plant-based alternatives. Charlotte Parson reports.
5 a.m. in London. No sound but the birds. No one on the streets but the milkman.
We deliver all types, from your regular full cream, semi-skimmed, skimmed. We also do organic milk. Again, same varieties.
Peter Bircham has been doing this job for 40 years. The British milkman with his traditional glass bottles has been around for nearly a century and a half, a rare constant in a fast-changing world. But change is coming to the dairy industry as concerns over health, animal rights and the environment fuel a rise in sales of non-dairy milk substitutes. And nowhere is this change more apparent than in places like this.
It used to be that when a barista asked you what kind of milk you wanted in your latte, they meant full fat or skimmed. Today, they're offering almond or oat, soy or coconut, and more people are choosing those options.
Roughly about 5 people out of 10 ask for dairy-free alternatives. And if you compare with around 3 to 5 years ago, it has increased quite a lot, as probably about 1 in 10 people used to order dairy-free alternatives.
Nearly half of British adults consume plant-based alternatives as part of their diet, drinking $125 million worth of them in a year. And that number looks set to rise. 46% of Brits say they're thinking about reducing their intake of animal products in the near future. But that doesn't mean cow's milk is being put out to pasture just yet. 52% of people still consume it.
Obviously, breeding of cows isn't exactly the best for our environment, so yeah, I sort of switched to oat milk about 2 years ago.
My grandson who lives with us, he has almond milk, so we have to get that for him, but I'm one of the old school and I just use semi-skim milk.
I like coconut when you're doing the hot chocolate, but other than that, oat for sure.
One of milk's main advantages over its new rivals is price. It remains the cheapest choice. But the gap isn't as big as it used to be. The price of milk has risen 35% in the past year, while the price of alternatives rose more slowly. As plant-based products fill shelves that were once the exclusive domain of milk, a war over words has broken out. Dairy groups are calling for the likes of almond milk, plant-based yogurt and vegan cheese to be renamed so consumers don't mistake them for dairy products. The EU has rejected that argument, but the UK is considering it right now. Back on the streets of London, Peter isn't worried about plant products or their names. Although his dairy recently began offering oat and coconut milk directly to coffee shops, he believes cow's milk is here to stay. Charlotte Parsons, CGTN, London.
And before we go, let's check out some major business headlines around the world that we are tracking. Technology stocks saw a record increase of $8.5 billion in inflows for the week leading up to Wednesday, largely driven by rising investor interest in artificial intelligence. And let's move on to Japan now, where OpenAI, the startup behind the ChatGPT chatbot, has received a warning from the country's privacy watchdog to refrain from collecting sensitive user data without proper permissions. And in the meantime, Canadian sportswear company Lululemon raised its annual sales and profit forecast on Thursday, reporting increased revenue in various regions worldwide. The company expects 2023 revenue to be around $9.5 billion. And that will do for this edition of Global Business here on CGTN. Thanks for being with us. I'm Lily Lu in Beijing. Till next time, bye for now.
This is CGTN.